Nature's cycle is never more impressive than that magic period when the water, the woods, and the wildlife stir under the lengthening rays of the spring sun. Even the long-ranging migratory waterfowl, whose wings beat thousands of air miles, return to nest and grow in their old backyards. Though they didn't go unnoticed during the snow and cold, now it's especially important to find out how many are left for the vital job of raising new families. Once fairly reliable yardsticks have been established for measuring the rise and fall of populations, then research can study those factors which affect their numbers. These studies, of course, are not only important to the animal, but to domestic livestock, and even man himself. And then there are studies of the general stresses and strains of wildlife just trying to get along in an environment which may be friendly, hostile, or changing.
We get moose, we get coyotes, we get deer, we get elk, we get beavers, sometimes even birds, even ravens.
That elk right there at 12 Mile, one that we put the meat in there is still pretty decent.
Is it in all those trees there?
Yes.
East side or west side?
Well, it's in the medium. You could get it from either way. I was eastbound and I looked and you can still see it pretty good.
Okay. In the summertime, if they get hit and lay for a couple days, they start bloating up. After they've been there a couple days, they start coming back to life because their legs start moving as they swell up.
There's friendly beeps and there's non-friendly beeps. I don't always appreciate it. It freaks me out each time they beep the horn because I think somebody's about to crash in to me or leave the roadway. I'd rather have them not beep the horn unless it's really required. And that's what horns are intended for. Horns are intended to say, watch out, rather than to say hello.
If you're on this stretch of highway at 7:30, it's just like you're watching the Indy 500 or the Daytona 500. I mean, people are just gotta go. It's pretty bad. I'm a single dad with a 6-year-old boy, trying to teach him how to stay out of the road, and I'm taking him to daycare. And there's a place that there's always deer. It's in an alfalfa field, and they raise barley and stuff, so the deer just congregate there. And I seen one cross the road, and I just lifted my foot off the gas pedal, because there's always going to be another one, and it was dark. And then all of a sudden, a little one come up, and all I did was just try to swerve, couldn't hit my brake, it just happened so fast. And just hit it with, I had a little Sentra, and the bumper's not very high, but it was probably perfect because it just hit it right in the body and knocked it down and rolled it a couple of times, and it popped up and ran off, and my boy's eyes are like this big around, and I said, that's why you don't play in the street.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of 20 birds are hit by cars. This is our oldest owl. And this bird, I have a glove on because she would love to take my hand off. This is Crackety Jones, named after the Pixie song. See? She got hit by a car, and I'm thinking it was either 89 or 90. She had a broken wing. Vehicle collisions, the reason owls especially is they're hunting in openings, you know, and openings are more and more often roadways. Plus, roadways attract things like mice and snakes and that kind of thing. When I was 14 years old, I started doing all this education, rehab, everything with screech owls back in Ohio. I had a pair of them that would fly around my bedroom, and I just opened the window and they'd fly in and out. My mom would go in the bedroom to get my laundry, and these owls would be flying around her head. Ah. So that was 30 years ago. Right, Crackety Jones? Raptors have a 70% mortality rate, so most of them, let's say 60 to 70%. 60 to 70% of the birds that are, you know, hatched in the spring are dead a year later. And vehicles are one of the major causes, vehicles and windows. But I'd say vehicles more than anything.
It's those experiences in our lifetimes when we're held. And that's the proper role that art fortunately sometimes achieves. And it's hot and sunny in the summer out here. So I have apple trees from eastern Washington. And this year I did corn, but I've also done wheat. Winter wheat was fun. People will walk down the street, you know, with their own thoughts, trudging, and they get somewhere in the middle here and they go, what's going on? What's this, corn? And so when you can hold somebody in that aesthetic arrest and the rest of their world drops away, that's the role of a good artwork. You know, people stop, taken out of whatever they were thinking about, and now they're awakened.
There's big trucks out there, and sometimes they have like chunks of ice that could fly off the truck, and also just little rocks, and especially if large vehicles drive by. You could be hit in the head. It's a balance, especially on hot days. You know, are you gonna wear a helmet or are you just gonna take your chances? It's safer to wear a helmet, but it's not always very pleasant.
This is Lucy in her Roadkill gear. She would find them for me. We'd go for a walk or a hike. Lucy'd say, "Hey boss, look at this one." "Oh, thanks, Lulu." And normally I drive with the plaster and orange cones and water and all the tools I need in the car. And if we happen to find a roadkill, the best camouflage was the orange vests and hard hats. They think you're working. Yeah, well, we are. And you certainly feel safer with all those cars roaring by.
This is one of the 40 plus something tracking beds that is in operation at this time. Each tracking bed is about 100 meters long, about 8 feet wide. Its intention is to record tracks of deer, both mule deer and white-tailed deer, as well as black bear, when they approach the road or when they leave the road. And we want to know how many deer and black bear cross the road because it relates to the effectiveness of mitigation measures that we'll be putting in place. There's going to be large areas that's going to have underpasses for wildlife, one overpass, wildlife fencing in between, aimed at reducing collisions on one hand, and the other hand, making it safer for animals to cross the road. No fresh tracks on this bed this time. We will check some others to see if we can find some. We should definitely be able to find a deer track.
We've had this bird for 3 years. This is a sharp-shinned hawk, and this bird was hit by a car as well. Her name's Margot. Hey, Margot. Come here. Come here. Oh, you be good. Come on. Whoa. Come on. You be good. Be good. Come here. Come here. Stand up. This is where the secondaries are. This is where the primaries are. So all the flight feathers are on this part of the wing right here. And so this bird does get cold in the winter. I put a windbreak up on this side and this side. It's actually greenhouse plastic. And that'll keep her from getting too cold from the wind. But you figure it's like leaving your coat open in the winter, missing that many flight feathers. This bird laid an egg this spring. I thought it was a he for 6 years. She's the mascot for Franklin Elementary School. Graham the barred owl. She's on t-shirts and they have pictures of her all over the school. She had a really bad laceration to that eye. She has a detached retina, so her pupil totally fills her eye. You can't see because she has dark irises. But again, you take a bird that relies on binocular vision, take one eye away, and their depth perception's gone. These are the birds that go. Oh, 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 oh.
The work that's in the gallery, I haven't shown it for 11 years. So it's been extremely rewarding these past couple months to have the bronzes I have finished in the gallery and to see people stand in front of them, answer their questions. You know what, this is a bone. I don't know what it is. It's a hoof. It's not armadillo. It's that moose again. The Alaska Railroad kills about 300 moose a year from Anchorage north to Fairbanks, and about 300 moose a year from Anchorage south to Seward. And the moose get on the tracks because the snow's not very deep. And they'll challenge the train. The record number of hits going north to Fairbanks, 42 in one trip. Can you imagine the images burned into the eyes of those engineers? Hitting 42 moose as your train moves along. Also then, there's a terrible toll on the Alaskan roads when the moose stumble up out of the snow and get onto the icy roads, and all these little Subarus are zooming back and forth, and the cars kill about 300 moose a year on those roads. Call it organism versus mechanism. But we were hunting armadillo. We found it.
This is where I have the peregrine sits here while I'm working. And this is my office where I do all the writing and all the artwork and all that stuff. When I look out here, I get easily distracted, but some great bird watching opportunities with the bald eagles, seeing Cooper's hawks out here, peregrine falcon overhead not too long ago. The goal of the Raptors of the Rockies educational program is just to get people to notice their surroundings. The out of doors, nature period, more than they had before. And birds are one way because birds are everywhere. You see them, they're at your feeder, they're flying around. There's so many species that it's fun to identify them, and birding has become quite popular.
Carcasses give off three main gases. They're amines, putrescines, and cadaverines. This smell is toxic in enough parts per billion. It is desensitizing. You get somewhat used to it, although it is cumulative in your body. So after years of doing this, I would get one whiff and feel like I needed to retch because my body was so packed up with these gases. I used to wear respirators, and then one time it leaked and I just got a whole blast of really bad smell, and I was vomiting in the respirator, trying to strip it off my face, trying to get another breath of air. So the wife of a friend of mine was coming up from Texas, and she had the taxi cab stop on the way to the airport to scoop this up. I don't think we're going to use this towel again. When you get into this part of the process, you sort of throw your watch away, and we'll have to watch how the ice melts off of this. I can begin building the dam walls of clay around it, and while that's happening, it's thawing and changing. And so you may make adjustments and say, oh, just let it thaw some more because it's moving. The same in the bronze casting side of it as well. I say, we're on bronze time. When's the bronze pour? Oh, when the metal's melted. And I want to tour these to zoos and aquariums. Get them out of the art gallery. And when families go to a zoo or an aquarium and the kids are splashing in the tank with the sea life and the starfish, or they're in the petting zoo, animals are beautiful, and that's all a lot of fun. And I want to show like the yin-yang symbol, the light and the dark. Oh, here's the beautiful animals. And this is what we do to them. Are we paying attention here? I'd also love to display these on top of gas pumps. You're filling up your automobile, and there's a roadkill armadillo. This is another cost of how we live. You have to buy this thing, put gas in it, pay for the insurance, pay taxes, get it registered, get speeding tickets, get parking tickets, the cost of our car. And you drive by a roadkill and go, well, I didn't do it. I didn't see it. I don't want to see it. So I'm trying to take the roadkill out of the horizontal plane, if you will, and put them on the vertical plane of a gallery wall or an exhibition place, so that they're out of context. And through the elegance of the bronze, I'm trying to make the pieces attractive enough with all the texture and detail that I can find, and cast and polish and color and make just right, so your first impression is to step forward towards the finished bronze and look at it. Then I take a step back. It's all an exercise process. It's a process of sculpture. It keeps going. You keep learning. You keep seeing how people are reacting. We all drive cars, so we're all responsible. Acceptable losses. I guess this is okay, right? Happens all the time. We don't even count them.
I'm not a fast lane type of guy. Well, you live in the fast lane, you die fast, so I'd rather take the slow lane. You don't get all worried about stuff that really doesn't matter. I know where the deer are because we go by every day. And around a full moon, they're out all the time. Well, yesterday there was 6 deer hits, just from not last night, but the night before. A lot of people, they'll travel this highway on a daily basis and they just don't pay attention to their surroundings or what's going on. And I can show you where pretty much all the deer are going to be, because if you pay attention, that's where they're at. So you know when to slow down or when to look for them or something. I mean, there's always going to be that suicidal one that's going to jump out from anywhere, but usually if you pay attention, you know where they're at, you know.
Between like 7 and 9 in the morning and past 4, it's you have to cross the road. It will take you several minutes waiting for traffic. And imagine being a deer or a bear. It's just hard. It really is a slaughter alley in terms of deer on the road, dead deer on the road, and eagles feeding off the carcasses, and then eagles getting hit. It's a mess. And bears feeding off of carcasses, and it's not good to have bears linger around the transportation corridor and where there's a lot of people around too. It just gets them into problems, and eventually you have no more bears. Or that bear is gone at least.
A lot of them around here, you don't see their eyes, because usually if they're going to blast across the highway, they just go. We almost hit a little buck coming home, Friday night I think it was. Well, you ready to go, bud? Yeah, we got to get going. Yeah, there you go. Both your shoes untied.
Monday morning, got your seatbelt on? Before you can buy a bunch of copies that will be away Monday morning here.
All we do is the research, and we provide politicians with the best available information to make those decisions. But it's not up to us to decide, what should be done where. We just advise based on the data we collect. But there's many variables that have to be weighed, and what the people want and don't want in certain road sections is important too. A vegetated overpass with soil and vegetation on it typically costs a couple of $1 million, depending on the design and dimensions, between $2 and $4 million, whereas an underpass can be constructed for a whole lot less. But they don't necessarily do the same thing. An underpass will not have vegetation, and there's some species, including grizzly bears, that do show a preference for overpasses, vegetated overpasses, versus non-vegetated underpasses. So here are some deer tracks indicating a deer indeed crossed the road, actually left the road, indicating it came from that side, ran across the road, across the tracking bed. So this would qualify as a clear crossing of a deer.
When we get under, you'll be able to see the game trails. There's actually one that comes from over in this area of the trees and side hills around and comes right in under this bridge. But you'll see there'll be tracks under the bridge right down the very bottom in the road. And then there'll also be another game trail right with minimum clearance to the bridge deck. The database goes into our biologist, and he compiles a list, and he's got a fact sheet that matches up the mile markers and the species hit. And actually it's pretty interesting to look at. You can see patterns where the crossing spots are when you get enough data. And there I got it filled out. Put down mile marker 15.3, westbound 990. I put it down on the 15th because that's when I pick it up. Mule deer, yearling, hit sometime on the weekend in remarks. You have to just figure animals are going to do the unexpected, the unpredictable, and if you don't drive with that in mind, you probably have a good chance of hitting them. I think that's why a lot of people hit them. They see the animal standing and they think, well, it'll stay there, and they just keep on at the present pace they're going, and then the animal walks right in front of them and they can't stop. They're just going too fast. This is going into our pit, so we don't really worry too much back here, and if we get too many, we may cover them up. The coyotes will have this gone within a week. Sometimes we're going to stop and have lunch, and then we forget about, oh, we can't sit on that.
You never get used to the smell. The animals, let's face it, you take an 18-wheeler that just runs over a deer and it spreads it out for 50 feet, and you go over and try to remove that. You just never really get used to that smell. We had an older gentleman that worked for us for several years. We pulled up next to a carcass one day. He got out of the vehicle, walked back, and he says, "I'll get it." And we hopped out of the vehicle and went back to watch him, and he bent over and he grabbed a hold of the deer, and he lost his lunch right there. And we were so busy laughing that we just grabbed a hold of the deer and threw it in there while he was over hugging a tree. And it was, you make jokes about this stuff because it takes your mind off the smell.
I drive this car because it gets 40 miles to the gallon and that. And if I hit a deer or something and it totaled it, I'm not out a whole lot of money. Not if I was driving my truck. Of course, with gas prices, I couldn't drive my truck every day. I'd go broke. If you see me looking around, it's because I'm always looking for deer. Because you can never, they're everywhere. The normal person, all they're worried about is getting to work, and they just don't pay attention. I do 65 miles an hour on the highway, and I get passed by everybody. I mean, not just some people, everybody. And it's like, why are they in that big of a hurry to either get in an accident or whatever? Why can't they just get their butts out of bed earlier? This pasture right over here will have, at any given time, 100 deer in it. So that's a place that you want to watch for, because they're out constantly crossing the road. There's some out there.
Oh, that's two of them.
See them with their tail up right there?
There's two of them right over there.
See them? Same thing in the evening. There'll be 15 or 20 deer standing there, and then when we get around the corner over here, there'll be 15 or 20 of them standing in this other pasture. Well, because we're late, you're gonna have to sit down and listen and eat your breakfast quick so you don't miss the bus. Okay?
My dad has to wake me up, like, I don't know how early, but I just want to sleep in.
It gets dark, you know, and yeah, it's hard to get him. It's hard for me to get motivated, let alone to get him motivated. Yeah, it's pretty tough.
You guys stay on this side of the gate till the bus gets there.
It is not just about building a road at the most economical cost. It is not just about the financial aspects and efficient transportation anymore. Roads are embedded in our society. We also have to think about the communities that are affected by these roads, the communities that these roads are supposed to serve, as well as the landscape and the animals that may be affected by these roads. So it really becomes a matter of finances and hard engineering, sociology, and also ecology. And we have to find a better balance between the two. The focus thus far, at least until the 1970s and early 1980s, really has been on hard economics and insufficient on, well, what does that mean for the communities along these transportation corridors? What does it mean on the long term for the landscape and how we like to live in that landscape? And how are the species, the wildlife species living in that landscape affected by the roads? And now we are having to retrofit all these roads, and it's really very expensive, a lot more expensive than making the right decision right away.
On this section alone, the numbers were over $10,000 last year that we spent with just deer removal. So it starts to be a sizable chunk when it comes to the gas tax dollar. Last year we removed a little over 300. The Forest Service biologists up here removed 173, and we estimate that we don't see between 20 and 25%. So, you know, you start to get up around 600 deer a year, so it's a lot of animals. I had some deer start to cross right in front of me one time, and I actually got my vehicle completely to a stop, and the deer ran into the side of me. And I've come around Salmon Lake going north, and a deer come out of absolutely nowhere. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and it ran in front of me, and I hit it. And I guess the only thing that come out of my mouth was, "Take that." Kind of makes you mad at the time, you know. So I guess if we could see a reduction in that, that'd be great. But I don't know how you do it. We did a 17-mile chip seal north of Seeley Lake. It took us about 5 days. In that 5 days, where we normally would have probably seen roadkill, because we had the speed limit posted at 35 miles an hour in that 17 miles, there was no roadkill, because people are driving slower. They're also paying attention. At 70 miles an hour, your closure speed on an animal that's wanting to cross a highway is considerably greater. It's twice as fast. Since we went away from the 55 mile an hour speed limit up to the used to be reasonable and prudent, now up to the 70 mile an hour limit, I think our roadkills are probably increased.
We have Jersey rail with concrete barrier down the middle now, but before we had the barrier down the middle, I met a motorhome, and as I met them, they hit a deer, and it pushed it off into my lane. It was spinning around and ended up stopping in the middle of the road. The deer did, and its back was broken, and it was looking, but it couldn't move anywhere. The only thing I had to kill it was a shovel. So I had to go and smack it on the head with a shovel and then get it off the road. Normally, you know, and like that other one, when you take it off, you just take it off and don't think about it. When you come back and look and you see it, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, we got this from Lincoln today. Left a little meat there. Well, just from looking at it, the whole bumper and this light and probably the mounting panel behind it, and it's probably caught the radiator or caught the tranny cooler or something from the looks of it dripping transmission fluid. So, but that's still going to cost about $3,000 to fix. I like painting cars. I like doing what I do. I actually enjoy it. And I've been fortunate enough to work for people that felt the same way I did. They did it more as a craft and a love for doing it, to the point where they weren't in a hurry. The almighty dollar wasn't their god, and that the way that the vehicle was fixed or how it looked when it was done was a reflection of who they are. When it starts freezing and those animals are all coming off those mountains down into the river bottoms and stuff, and they're all moving across the road and all that, I mean, it impacts everything from people not having their car for a while, or, you know, close call, or a lot of people, they try to avoid the deer or something like that, and they end up getting in a worse situation than they would if they'd have just hit it. So I mean, it definitely impacts a lot of stuff, you know, whether it's emotional or monetary.
One of the big reasons I'm doing this is I read Rascal about someone that had a raccoon as a kid, and My Side of the Mountain, of course, which is the Sam that flies the peregrine falcon. So kind of simultaneously I got into both of those aspects. I would raise baby raccoons and foxes and squirrels, and my parents would have people over for dinner or something, and they'd say, "Kate, go call up all your animals." And it was almost like the Beverly Hillbillies or something, you know. Come on, and a raccoon would come running up and a fox would come down. I just found a story I wrote. Look at this. Junior zoologist records Sam's progress, 1974. There's Kate Phillips at age 14. I think I'm about 15 in this one, and this was my first red fox that I got as a baby, and I released it in the fall, and that fox's name was Tequila. That is a picture of one of my first raccoons that I had when I was a kid back in Ohio, and here 30 years later is a raccoon that I rehabbed and released just for kicks. And then here's the guy that taught me how to weld, Bill Orman, 85 years old. I remember asking him if he thought I was too old to learn how to weld. He said, "Are you kidding?" Try to make everything 1.5 times life size. So this is a drawing that I did, and this will be the raven. Turn on the gas. And I'll just tack these wings right on here. First I kept track of hours, and then I just went, You know, I work 5 hours one day, 10 hours. I'm out there, you know, till like 1 in the morning. So I totally lost track of hours. The Eagle took about a month. They're averaging about a month, but this new one I'm working on, the Raven, I'm going to get it done this week. It's going to be like a 1 or 2 week job. It's getting easier to bend the feathers and cut them out and color them. It's getting easier.
Metal workbench with the earphones on one day in 1989 working on Roadkill bronzes, and when over the radio came the news of the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So I'm listening, and the lumps in the oil are dead seals and dead sea otters. There was a foot of oil on top of the water, and I sort of made one of those epiphanies that oh, well, this oil's for our cars, it's for our asphalt, it's for our motor oil, our diesel. I guess these sea otters are roadkills too. So I branched off into spill kills, road kills, spill kills. And the seals that we pulled out of there, those are called prop chops, where boat propellers hit them. Now go back to bed, little birds. They'll get to you. I think we have assistance. Paul! Oh, good.
So did you never know anyone who kicked armadillos? Charlie McKenna, who was a cohort at the University of Michigan, was a Texan. They used to go out, and because armadillos will defensively roll into a ball, just like possums will play possum, and you could kick them. And so they used to ride around the desert and chase armadillos down. When they rolled in the ball, they'd kick them, and then they'd get back in the Jeep and go try to find another one.
Really?
While drinking, you know, lots of tequila and smoking a lot of dope and whatever else. It was the 60s.
I'm putting Fremont Fine Arts, and then I'd like to do a date so that I can tell how old the mold is. From Joseph Campbell, I learned all life is sorrowful. This is a Buddhist way of looking at the world. Whatever you eat that gives you your life was once alive, whether it was a cow or a baby carrot you're weeding from your garden. I can almost hear baby carrots. Those are the best, you know, you're thinning your carrots. Ah! Ah! That has given you life. We should acknowledge this. So when you go to, say, not to pick on McDonald's, but what do? You have a clown selling you a cheeseburger in a styrofoam box, and we're not they don't want us to be connected to that was once a living animal out in a green pasture, eating green grass, going to sleep at night, having friends. We have been pried away from the realities of how we live.
Roads are used by basically everyone. All sectors of our economy depend on it in one way or the other. Everybody sees animals getting killed on roads, everybody knows about the problem, but yet we don't seem to have a solution that satisfies everyone. And we certainly haven't implemented any of the real long-term sustainable solutions that would solve one or more of the problems related to roads and traffic. Really, human safety is what started the mitigation measures, as we refer to them, along roads. And from that moment on, we started to evolve a little further. Then we started to care about certain species more than other species, especially species that are threatened or endangered. We felt that it was not okay to have them get killed on the roads. And then we sort of evolved beyond that. We said, well, it's not just the endangered and threatened species that matter, it's also other species. If they are affected on the population level, that is, a species is now more likely to go extinct in this particular region, partly because of all the roadkill. And then we went on a little further and said, any effect on the population level, regardless of whether it also results in a reduction in population survival probability, that is also not okay. And then in certain areas, we have evolved yet another step further, where we say it's not okay to have mass mortality of any particular species, and we don't really care whether it matters on the population level or not. We don't really care whether this is a threatened or endangered species. It's just not okay to kill a lot of animals if we can do something about it.
I do wash my hands afterwards. This is what these guys will eat today. This is our most common bird that does suffer from vehicle collisions, in my experience, are great horned owls. They're just flying across roadways, hunting, and it's night and you never see them till the last second. These birds often are hit by cars because bald eagles, golden eagles feed on carrion, especially in the winter. And so a deer gets hit by a car and you'll find groups of these eagles feeding on it. They'll eat until they're gorge. And it's not like they can't fly, but they're not going to fly. You know, they can always fly. It's just that they're going to be a little slower on the takeoff if they're totally gorged on this deer meat. So they'll sort of look at the road as a runway and run down or try to fly down, and they often get hit by cars. It's really sad.
This is our casting area, and normally I start the casting by preheating the furnace maybe 3 or 4 times just to get the heat to drive out any of the moisture from our Seattle air so that nothing turns to steam and pops or breaks. It takes about 3 hours to get the metal up to temperature and melted. And then the pour is maybe 15 seconds. Something like from The Wizard of Oz. I would say often the first response is laughter, sort of a nervous laughter that then settles down and gets a little bit more serious. So I kind of think that humor might be a good antidote to what we're really feeling sometimes. Let's try and laugh a little bit. I have had 1 or 2 viewers who just sat down in the chair and wept, and others that were curious about how do you do this or why do you do this. The 5th one in the series was a squirrel that all the fur had been beaten off of it, and a truck tire had just gone over it and left these same sort of patterns in this mush of a squirrel. So I molded and cast that, and when they repaired the concrete street outside, the guys here at the foundry schmooed it down into the cement, so it's actually installed in the street where it was molded, just out here. In the rain, we could go look at that. So there's a bronze roadkill in the street.
It's sort of something you see on a somewhat regular basis. Like, I grew up in the backwoods of Minnesota, and so I saw a lot of roadkill and have watched, a lot of cars hit deer and things like that. So it's sort of more of a memoir of interacting with a lot of animals that you don't really see on a daily basis here inside the city.
I'm not much in for the roadkill. I'm kind of an animal person. I don't, it's great. It's great what he does. Yeah.
Little elegies to dead animals, to our beautiful highways and oil travel systems and all the things that kill them. It's perfect. Well, at least they're remembered.
The animal is dead, and the art goes on beyond the animal. I'm not disturbed that it represents a dead animal. Just kind of look at it as art.
I think it's neat how he made such a violent way of death so beautiful. You could almost be revolted because it looks so real, but to cast what is normally trash or what is a life that's been disregarded is pretty revolutionary.
Yes, surely there are a lot of animals who are killed on the road, but what is the answer pour empêcher ça? To stop that? Yes, I know this problem because I live in a country where there are a lot of animals who are killed also on the roads. But what can we do?
Hitting an animal, especially large ones, can be very traumatic for people. We don't really think about it that often. We often think about it in abstract terms. You know, there's wildlife being killed, and you know, there's people getting injured, or every now and then somebody actually gets killed as well. And of course, there's the animals that can get killed, and there's the damage to the vehicles concerned, and then there's DOT personnel having to pick up carcasses and disposing of them. There's blood stains on the pavement. It's quite something to hit a large deer or an elk, or even a larger animal, and having all that blood all over, and sometimes they actually enter the passenger space through the windshield, and people can be affected by that for many, many years. They may think, wow, I really don't like to ride my car anymore. I do not want to drive on this road anymore. And maybe I should rethink about, you know, where I live, where I work, and reduce the use of my car. Or maybe I should not try to commute early in the morning and at dusk, when animals, especially deer, are most active and when I'm most likely to hit such an animal.
We're continually facing new challenges that are going on with what's going on around us. More traffic, more people moving into the area, more people feeding the animals. That causes the animals not to migrate like they normally would. The consensus out there from one that's been in the traffic industry for 26 years is, you're in my way, get out. People have the idea that once you get in the vehicle, they turn the key, you put it in drive or put it in high gear, and I should be able to drive 70 miles an hour year round. I don't care what the conditions are. And if that deer gets in my way, too bad. And that's pretty blunt. But that is public behavior.
I participated in May in a show called Weapons of Mass Distraction, and I was trying to highlight the fact that we're not allowed to see the coffins of the soldiers returning. Again, we're not acknowledging what we're doing. Not unlike roadkills. Oh no, don't look at them. Not supposed to see them. No, don't take any pictures. No. Can't see them. So I'll try and bring some balance back. Yeah, we have to acknowledge both sides of it. I heard this on the radio, that worldwide, each year, 1,200,000 people die from automobiles. 50 million people are injured each year. 3,000 die each day. And then I wrote, how many animals? We don't keep stats. It's this whole system that we've built. You know, if you don't drive your car, you are non-competitive. You're out. You know, we've set it up this way. The thing to do is to acknowledge how we live and take responsibility for it.
If we think about where we've been in the past and where we are now, that we will continue to see a growing sense of awareness in society. There is also no fundamental difference between killing these raccoons and killing the butterflies and the moths. And maybe the mosquitoes will be yet a whole another step that may require another 5 decades or more before we actually feel sorry for the mosquitoes too. But you're taking a life. How do we feel about taking lives?
Many years ago, it's been over 10 years, I got a bald eagle, a hatcher bald eagle, that we ended up banding and releasing, but there was a Colombian ground squirrel got hit by a car. A coyote was eating that, it got hit by a car, and the bald eagle was feeding on the coyote, and it got hit by a car. Fortunately, it was so easy. It was a little concussion. The bird could stand, but was just a little bit slow in reactions. I had a big flight room, a lot bigger than that. We took the bird down to where they, at the time, took all the carcasses off the road. And they piled them down off the road at Lee Metcalf National Wildlife Refuge. We took it out and I'll never forget it, opened my arms, and the bird just took off flying, circled around, did about 3 big circles, and then went right back to the highway. Because that is a smorgasbord out there. And that's where that bird had found plentiful food. That bird probably ran into trouble again. So yeah, it's profoundly affects some people. Especially here's a bald eagle, a symbol of our country, feeding on a carcass on the side of the road, getting hit by a car.
by increasing our knowledge of the negative effects of roads and traffic, we can make better roads, less damaging roads. At the same time, we should be really thinking about our transportation system in a much broader context. Where do we want to go on the long term? And it seems that roads, traffic, vehicles, it really is a dead-end road. We can't just increase our use of vehicles, keep on building more roads or making existing roads wider and wider, especially in densely populated areas on the East Coast, certain areas on the West Coast. Even though it may be a 6-lane road one way, how many lanes will we build? How many lanes will be enough? We can't keep up making existing roads wider and wider and wider. We have to really rethink about where we work, where we live, and how we transport ourselves from one place to the next.